Okay, Fernando, can you hear me? I think I'm online. Yes. Okay. Let me start again, and thank you, Fernando, for the presentation and for the invitation. And good morning, everyone, and good evening for some of you. Um, I will pass to the next slide where the agenda of the presentation is. Um, I'll present a short introduction to our company. We will pass through the Kyoto Protocol and the Clean Development Mechanism. We'll also address the voluntary carbon market from the supply side and the demand side. And finally, Luis Huguet will present the carbon market and will present some issues regarding prices and how they are doing today. Let me introduce a short presentation of Deuman. The company was launched in the mid 90s, and with our first office in Chile, where I'm based right now. And our main focus today, and since those days, is to focus in the identification of activities that mitigate climate change. So we are mainly focused on renewable energy projects, energy efficiency, and today on the carbon markets. Today we have 5 business units. They're quite different units. Our core business is the carbon market. So we deal with clean development mechanism projects, and also with projects.
Sorry, Rodrigo. We should launch again. Sorry.
Okay. Are we okay right now, Fernando?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
So Uh, thank you, Fernando. I was well. We also other business unit that we have is focused on energy efficiency. This is mainly focused on energy efficiency audits to in the industrial sector, industrial companies, and we have the last 2 business units that are related to renewable energy services, mainly focused on renewable energy projects. We deal with pre-feasibility studies and feasibility studies. And finally, energy consulting, where we have or deal with fuel or energy projects, and mainly focused on studies for governmental agencies and also private companies. Well, on this slide, I present our current offices. As I said, we have offices in Chile, in Peru since 2002, and also in Brazil since those days. We started operations in Ecuador since 2007, and also we have operation in Spain, where our CEO is based, and we are starting operations a few months ago in Africa, in Mozambique, and we are developing projects in the countries that you can see on the right side of the slide. So we also have projects in countries where we still don't have offices, like Nicaragua, Panama, and Mexico. Um, well, this is I will just point out some important facts of this slide. This is a timeline of Deuman history and the Kyoto Protocol. Um, we've been dealing with projects or studies regarding emission reductions since 2001, where we started developing some studies for the Global Environmental Fund. Then in 2003, we started working with the Environmental Commission here in Chile, developing the first project first CDM project portfolio. And in 2007, after the Kyoto Protocol, we have our first project where we have participation. I mean, projects that we are partly owner of the CRs. We have registered Santa Marta landfill gas project. And in an important fact is in 2009 that we became the consultants for the Inter-American Development Bank. So we are dealing with all the projects that are developed by the BID during this year and next year. Well, I'll pass now through the Kyoto Protocol and the Clean Development Mechanism. Well, this slide presents the road to the regulation. One of the first steps or issues regarding the Kyoto Protocol is the creation or the foundation of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. This was in 1988, and they prepared their first report in 1991, where they stated that the global warming or climate change it was real. So they called the international community to start doing or facing climate change. Then in 1992, the United Framework Convention on Climate Change was adopted, and then entered into force in 1994, where the first negotiation to set the target or greenhouse gas emission reduction target where it started. And then in 1997, the Kyoto Protocol was adopted, where its main feature is that it sets binding targets for 37 industrialized countries and the European community for reducing greenhouse gas emissions. The amount to the reductions amount goes to an average of 5% against the 1990 levels over the 5-year period from 2008 and 2012. And one important aspect of the Kyoto Protocol is that it recognized that the developed countries are principally responsible for the current high levels of greenhouse gas emissions in the atmosphere. This as a result of more than 150 years of industrialized activity. So the Kyoto Protocol will place a heavier burden on developing nations under this principle of common but differentiated responsibilities. So the Kyoto Protocol will list the industrialized countries in what is called the Annex 1 of the Kyoto Protocol, and also will list economies in transition and that are listed in Annex B, and I will go on this later. Finally, so the Kyoto Protocol was adopted in Kyoto in December 1997, and later in 2001 the legal or the rules of the Kyoto Protocol, or the modalities and procedures were adopted in Marrakech. And so now we have the legal documentations in place, and finally with the ratification of Russia in 2005, early 2005, in February the 16th, 2005, the Kyoto Protocol entered into force. Well, so the the Protocol, it also establish three market-based mechanisms that are designed to ensure that the industrialized countries that are listed in Annex 1 of the Kyoto Protocol meet their emission reduction targets. So there are these three market-based mechanisms. The first one is the international emission trading. Is defined under the Article 17 of the Kyoto Protocols, and these mechanisms will allow the purchase and sale or of emission reduction among the parties included in Annex 1. So it's really what it built the market and the transactions of emission reduction. Then we have the joint implementation mechanism, which is defined under the Article 6 of the Kyoto Protocol, and this mechanism allow Annex 1 countries accounting for the emission reductions that are generated by the investment in projects that are in other in other Annex 1 country. This is our basically countries that have economies in transition. One example is projects implemented between a Ukrainian company and a German company. So they implement the project and they can use the emissions obtained from the project, and they have to split the emission reductions obtained by the project. And finally, we have the clean development mechanism that will be the mechanism that we are going to address into more detail. And this mechanism is presented or described under the Article 12 of the Kyoto Protocol. And this mechanism allow emission reduction projects that are implemented in non-Annex 1 country. For example, Chile is one non-Annex 1 country. So it can be implemented a project in Chile, and it is possible to sell the emission reduction to an Annex 1 country so they can meet their targets. I'll pass to some applicability conditions to a CDM projects, and this is should comply with all of them. We see here the first condition is that the participation of the owner of the project or the company that is developing the project is voluntary, and this will be assessed by the agency or the national authority. And this means also that the project is not mandatory by regulations. And other important aspect is that the project must produce real, measurable, and long-term benefits, and that emission reduction should be real, so they must be also measured under the monitoring plan. One important issue is that the project should contribute to the sustainable development of the host country, and these are going to, each country should define the sustainability criteria. This means how it's going to assess that a project really contribute to sustainable development of the country. The projects also should provide emission reduction that are additional to what would otherwise have occurred. This means that the projects are not business as usual projects, and that they go farther, and in some cases you have to demonstrate that you need the CERs or the carbon credits revenue for the project to be implemented. Of course, the projects must reduce greenhouse gas emissions that the greenhouse gases that are indicated by the Kyoto Protocol. And finally, if a project wants to go through the CDM, the host country must have ratified the Kyoto Protocol, and have the designated national authority in place, which is the entity that will give the national approval for the project. Well, on this slide, I have the so-called CDM project cycle. So these are the stages that a CDM project should pass through to get carbon credits. First of all, we have of course an idea, a project idea, and we have it is necessary to develop or the a project design document. Is a document that is there is a template that you can download from the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change webpage, and on this document you have to you should describe the project. There is different sections. You have to apply an approved methodology and methodologies for estimating the baseline and emission reduction and how to implement the monitoring plan are approved by United Nations. So when you present a project where no methodologies approve it, you have to present the project with a methodology that that have to be assessed by United Nations. Nowadays, we have more than 80 methodologies approved. So, is despite there are still some new methodologies seeking for approval, most of the projects that are going into the pipeline, they all use approved methodologies or current approved methodologies. Well, in this document, you also have to address additionality, so prove the additionality of the project. Apply the methodology, so you have to calculate the baseline and the emission reduction, and also describe the monitoring plan. Once you have the PDD developed, you have to pass through this like three processes that are in line here. One is the national approval, then is the validation and registration. National approval should be given by the designated national authority. So it depends on the country where the project is implementing the requirements that the DNA or the designated national authority will ask for. Then validation, you have to hire a DOE, that's a designated operational entity, which are accredited entities by the United Nations. For example, you have here DNV, SGS, TUBE, there's INOR. There's quite more than 20 DOEs that can be hired for these purposes, and they have accreditation depending on the sector of the sector of projects. So, and validation, what the DOE will do is to assess that the information in the project design document is correct, and also will visit the project. That's the on-site visit, and we'll check that all the documentation is in place. And finally, if the project is validated by DOE, we will request registration to the United Nations with a validation report and together with the PDD. And it will take registration 4 weeks after requesting registration for small scale and 8 weeks for large scale. So that's an important point, because we have two different types of projects, small scale and large scale, and they're defined. There's some threshold to this, like for an energy project you have the threshold is 15 megawatts of installed capacity. And there are some other two thresholds depending on emissions reduction that can be obtained from the project. Once the project is registered, you can the project can start monitoring the emission reduction, and those are going to be the emission reduction that can be certified through the CDM. The project host or the project owner should define the verification period or the monitoring period. That is, generally companies or project owners do it for a period of 6 months or a year. It depends on the projects. Projects that reduce large quantities of greenhouse gases, there are some projects that do it every 2-3 weeks. Those are mainly industrial greenhouse gas projects. So if you fix the monitoring period, you have to prepare a monitoring report where you explain basic information of the project and how you've been dealing with the monitoring plan, how you maintain and calibrate the monitoring equipment, and after that, with a monitoring report, you have to hire the services from a third party again. That's the DOE, designated operational entity. That for small scales, it can be the same one that provided services for validation, and for large scale, you have to hire another DOE to avoid conflict of interests. So in verification, what the DOE will do is to assess the monitoring report and confirm that all the information is correct and that the project did all the calibration of equipment and that everything is okay. And that the emission reductions were calculated on a conservative manner. After verification, you have a verification report from the DOE, so you can ask for the issuance of the CRs by the United Nations. This also will take around 4 weeks to get the issuance of the CRs. So, well, that's the CDM project cycle. There's several stages. Maybe it's important to give some timelines for this, or the lead times. Few years ago, you were able, or a project were able to pass through the CDM project cycle in approximately 8 months or maybe a year. Today, these times are a bit longer because of the system, the amount of projects there are in the system, and the workload that the DOEs have. So today we're talking more than 12 months, maybe 16 months or more is a conservative time gap. I will pass to the next slide where I'm going to present some statistics, some CDM statistics. We have currently more than 4,200 projects in the CDM project pipeline. These projects can be downloaded or visited through the United Nations Framework Convention website. And it is expected almost 3 billion CRs from those projects, from all the projects in the pipeline. And we have 1,700 registered projects. So these are the projects that are able to certify emission reductions, and from those projects we expect like 1.6 billion CRs to be obtained. And today, these are figures from yesterday. We have 51 projects that are currently requesting registration. The next slide, there's a graph that you can, this graph can be, the source is the United Nations, and you can see the expected average of annual CERs from the projects that are registered. And as we can see, the share is very important. China has a very important share of the expected CERs. we have almost 60% from China and 11% from India. Well, this is we have this these countries are the bigger emittent from bigger emittent countries. So this is logic. And well, we have then other countries like Republic of Korea, Mexico. We have over there Chile and Argentina. So well, this is how the share is doing today, and it is expected that it will continue in these figures. And then we have another graph representing the registered projects. This is in number. As you can see, we also have China with a big share of the graph, 35 to almost 34%, and then 25% for India. As you can see, the share here is less, but from China and more from India. This is due to the types of projects that China has. It basically has less projects than in India, but there are projects that have a huge potential on energy, huge potential on generating emission reductions. This is because some of them are industrial gases. Well, I'll go to the next step and start with the project cases. We have here Santa Marta landfill gas. This project that is located here in Chile is a project that consists in capturing and flaring the landfill gas that is produced through the organic decay of the waste. Well, this is a big sanitary landfill. It's there are 70,000 tons that are disposed every month in this sanitary landfill, and it covers almost 1.5 million house habitants. So this is mainly household waste. Well, it's important to highlight that it can be classified as a world-class landfill because it has a liner. It's a new landfill. It's from 2002, so it has a base liner, and it's also covered, and operations are very well managed. So it's a project that, if you see the CDM project cycle, it's a project that is already verifying emission reduction. We already verified 40,000 tons from the first monitoring period, and we are waiting for almost 200,000 tons for the next verification periods. That we have 3 more periods under verification and requesting issuance. Well, what is important here is that we implemented this project with methodology ACM 0001. This is approved consolidated methodology, and number 1, and on version 4. And up to date, we so there have been a few revisions of the methodology, but the version that it works for our project is version 4, and we will continue working with this version until the first crediting period ends. This is a crediting period, renewable crediting period for 7 years, where you can certify emission reductions. Well, in the next slide, we have other project that is located in Peru. This is a fuel switching project in a cement plant. Mainly, the fuel switching runs to the cement kilns. Basically, the fuel switching is from coal and other carbon intensive fuels. Pet coke and bunker is used in this project. So they are switched to natural gas. Natural gas, of course, is a less carbon intensive fuel. Its emission factor for a energy unit is less than coal or the other fuels that I named. Um, so and of course, a cement plant is a high consumption. It has a high consumption of fossil fuels, and the project presents a emission reduction potential around 300,000 tons per year. This project was registered late last year, and we are working on the monitoring plan right now, and we're monitoring the emissions and preparing the monitoring reports to start verification. It's important that the registration of this project took longer than expected. We took more than 2 years to 2 years and a half to register the project, and the project was implemented before registration. So this is an important aspect, because we are currently certifying the what is called the stranded assets. Those or stranded credits. Those are the emission reductions that are generated between the implementation date until the registration. So those are credits that cannot be sold through or commercialized through the regulated market, and they should go through the voluntary market, and we'll pass through that later. And of course, we are working on the marketing of the CRs of this project today. Well, I would like to point out some lessons learned on the projects, not only on these two projects, but in all the projects that we've been implementing and passing through the CDM project cycle. One important thing is that, and it could be a recommendation, is to present conservative emission reduction estimations in the PDD. This is important because on verification you will be asked by the audit team of the performance of the project, and despite you are short or you pass the estimations, this is not a good aspect of a project, because it is also of course that when you addressed or you assessed the additionality in the PDD, you were considering the estimations that you had at the beginning. So it's an important point that the DOE will point out in verification. Another thing that is important is to design a robust monitoring plan since the PDD, because in that way you are going to do it better and on first verifications. We have some projects that the monitoring plan, or this is mainly due to the learning by doing of this kind of projects. It's a new system, so at the beginning we started developing monitoring plans, simple monitoring plans, and the first verifications of the project were quite complicated. Other important thing, and this is also related with the monitoring plan, is to be aware of the calibration and maintenance of the monitoring equipment. This is going to be a very critical point that it will be addressed by the DOE when verifying. And of course, if you have any mistakes on the monitoring plan or during the monitoring period, this will have implications in the cash flow, and this is very important. Like for example, if you have problems that were not detected by DOEs but at the end were detected by the United Nations when you are requesting issuance of the CRs, and to solve the problem you have to withdraw the crediting period that you are trying to get credits, then it's going to be quite it will take longer to put this crediting period into the system again, because this is one of the points that is not documented under the modalities and procedures. We had an example in the past that we wait more than 9 months to get the project to take the project from the withdrawal status. So that's quite important because cash flow will be affected in 9 months, and that's quite important time gap. Other thing that is important is to consider when you develop a CDM project is that United Nations is taking longer and longer to develop the completeness check of the information that you provide them. For example, when you are requesting issuance, in the last 2 years or 2 years ago, the secretary took 2 or 3 days to upload the documentation, while today they are taking more than 3 or 4 weeks to upload the documentations that you present. So this will also have implication in the cash flow of the projects. You should be considered these time gaps. Well, another point, and just I will pass through very quickly, is the validation verification manual. This is a manual that was adopted by the United Nations or by the CDM Executive Board a few months ago, and so project owner should provide more evidence to the DOEs. The on-site visits takes longer due to this because they have to obtain more information of the project, like the early consideration of the CDM, and also the reports, the validation and verification reports are quite. They need to have more information, so the time periods for registration and issuance, or the validation and verification processes are longer today. Well, I will pass through the voluntary carbon market. As I said before, I will address the voluntary carbon market from the demand side and from the supply side. I will start from the supply side. The voluntary market is a parallel market to the CDM, or parallel market to the emission reductions that are obtained from project-based emission reductions. We are going to have several standards where you can verify the greenhouse gas emissions reduction, and we can separate this into two systems, and maybe today with the development of the United States market, we will have more and more standards or specifications. From one side, we have what is the Chicago Climate Exchange, that is on carbon trade system. Of course, it's a voluntary system, but it is binding the companies, or the target that a company voluntarily set. From the other side, we have the over-the-counter market. Is here where we have most of the or several standards where you can verify the emission reduction, and this market is bilateral. There are bilateral accords from among the buyer and the seller of the credits. Of course, it's voluntary and it's not legally binding. The next slide here, we have the main factors that originate the voluntary carbon market. First of all, the voluntary market allow the countries that still don't ratify the Kyoto Protocol to verify emission reduction and to commercialize emission reduction. Also, is an alternative for those projects that still don't have an approved methodology, and that the project owner don't want to present the methodology through the CDM code. It probably takes more than two years to have a new methodology approved, or for those projects where an approved methodology by the United Nations is not applicable. Then we have also it is an alternative for small project activities that cannot run with the CDM transaction cost, because it is supposed to have a lower transaction cost, the voluntary carbon market. Also, it is an alternative to those projects that want to pass through and more agile certification process, and you don't have to go through United Nations, so you pass through independent standard. And of course, the voluntary market is also, and this is more for the demand side, will supply the offsetting demands from non-compliance entities, like for example financial entities that want to offset their emission, or they want to reduce their emissions. The voluntary market is growing rapidly in the last years, and is well, as in the regulated market, you have the CRs, the certified emission reduction. Here you have the VRs, that are the verified emission reduction, and then that, as well as the CRs, they represent 1 ton of CO2 reduced. Well, and this is quite important, is that the levels of demand in many cases are quite similar to the CDM. The standards right now are quite robust, and also considering additionality. Not last year, where projects, not additional projects, were certified or verified by voluntary standards. Prices are roughly between 25 and 30% of the CRs. They are cheaper than CRs, and this depends on the robust of the standards that are used to verify the project. Well, there's a small graph. I'll go through. I'll not go through it, but it is expected that the voluntary market expands and get to near to the 1/3 of the emission reduction that are under the CDM in the next 2 years. Well, here in this slide you can see the standards. There's quite a lot of standards, more than 10 standards on the voluntary carbon, but the strongest one, or the robust ones, are the VCS that are on the top left hand side of the slide, and also the voluntary carbon standard from the gold standard, and the VR plus, that is a standard developed by a DOE, that's tube suit. Then we have other standards like CCB standards, are mainly related to forestry projects, forestation projects, and like also like Plan Vivo. And there are some of the standards that are geographically limited, so they're like, for example, just for Australia. Well, I want just to point out some points regarding demand of the demand side of the voluntary carbon market. Of course, the entities, or the principal clients of the voluntary market are companies that are designing a corporate climate change strategy. Definitely, companies are very aware of this issue today. Of course, the risk profile has changed in the last year with the climate change. The risk profile is not related anymore with local emissions or risks. It is mainly focused on this new problem that is a long-term problem, and with reversible damage. And companies they're assessing their new risk associated with climate change, and we have like regulatory risk. This is quite important, because if new regulations are adopted by different countries, of course there are going to be a rise in prices of goods or products. There is also another risk that is related to the supply chain. Of course, if, for example, a steel supplier is demanded to comply with some reduction targets, uh, that is going to have an implicit cost on their operation, and they will transfer this cost to your company if you are a demandant of steel. There is also risk of litigation. That's quite similar to what happened in the last years with tobacco companies or chemicals companies. We see, like for example, in the United States, some coal-based power plants were sued by. This was in Mississippi. They were sued by the community, blaming that their emission caused the powerful of the Katrina hurricane. So that's one other risk that is presented today with climate change, and also reputation risks. So this is quite important, and companies are addressing these issues today. Well, the other thing that is important is the international scenario. We have the Carbon Disclosure Project. This is a project that is owned by institutional investors that they are talk about the performance on climate change that companies has. So, because this will influence the real price of companies, and so they are asking the main or large companies around the world to answer some questions regarding carbon footprint, greenhouse gas, the performance of the project regarding their greenhouse gas emissions, assess new risks and opportunities, and of course going farther on this and get the engagement with their suppliers. So this is a project that is quite important because they're pulling companies to address climate change. And then we have these famous laws, or these laws that are under assessment by in Europe and in the United States regarding carbon tax. So products must be aware about this, because it depends on the information you have and what you've been doing in the last year regarding climate change or your carbon footprint. So to set this carbon tax to different kind of products that are mainly exported. So exportations products are the ones that are focused on this market. Well, and finally, I think this is the last slide, and I'm taking quite long to this presentation, as the corporate carbon management. Here we have a cycle how companies should manage carbon or climate change, and of course you have to build a plan, know your real aspects, how you are working with this, and which are the what a company needs to manage. An important phase of carbon management is to measure the carbon footprint, then to assess the risk and opportunities, and of course fixing emission reduction targets and offsetting. And from the offsetting, here you can see where the demand of the VRs comes from, is from companies that are managing their carbon footprint, and they want to offset those emissions that are not cost effective to be reduced. And finally, we have communication. That's a very important activity that companies are very aware of that. So you can communicate what your company is doing to tackle climate change, and in a simple manner. Well, finally, and was just to Luis start his presentation. Here we have some projects that we've been dealing under the voluntary carbon market. Is like, for example, the offsetting of the Al Gore event here in Chile. Also some fairs. We also offset a renewable energy event from a governmental agency, and and we've been working also with several companies, wineries that mainly they export their products to European countries and also United States. Well, I will want to pass the floor
Thank you,
to.
Rodrigo. I'm more like a face-to-face type of guy with meetings, but I feel like a telemarketer with this funny headphone and so forth. But just I'll start talking if there's any questions regarding any type of concept or any idea or anything I say. Just please go ahead and say it. Okay. I sometimes I tend, even though this is a pretty generic presentation, I tend to get a little bit technical on certain issues. So what we're going to do now is we're going to talk a little bit about the carbon market, and there's been a lot of talk recently about how big and how great the carbon market is in certain media. There's a lot of hype. Well, let's demystify a little bit and go a little bit down to basics as to what it is. Okay, first of all, this is the firm I work for, Panther Carbon. It works very closely with Deuman. As you can see, it's recently founded. We're privately owned, and we're only dedicated to the carbon market. That is, we're a brokerage. We don't an advisory firm. We don't deal with any other products that are not related to the carbon market. Right now, our main focus is in the area of primary CR and VR brokerage. We do provide advisory. We do broker, and sometimes the underlying projects, CDM projects. Many of them need capital. Many of them need finance. So we also can provide that type of service from our clients. And now the brokers in our firm have closed, I mean, these are some rough figures, but approximately 5 million CRs and ERUs. The ERU deal was one of the first ERU ERPA in the market, approximately 2 million VRs, and slightly over 1.2 million EUAs. The amounts are considerably larger for the CRs, ERUs, and VRs. With this said, let's start. I mean, why CR is worth something. I mean, there's this presentation, you've seen a few projects that Rodrigo has showed, a fuel switch in Peru, I think, which is Cementos Lima, and you've also seen a landfill in Chile. And all the CDM cycle in this project is aimed at obtaining CRs. Now, why are the CRs worth something? This is a pretty basic idea, right? The main price driver behind this is the fact that European national allocation plans allow the use of CRs for compliance purposes. Okay, what this means that it enables a swap between CRs and EUAs. EUAs are the credits traded under the European trading scheme. The EUAs typically trade higher than the CRs. And if you sell if your compliance firm, if you have EUAs in your account, you can sell those and use for compliance purposes the CRs for a certain amount that is established in the National Allocation Plan. The acronym is the other way around. It's NAP, not PNA. Excuse me for that. Aside from that, we also see some demand come from Japan, who purchase CRs for voluntary offsetting in their carbon footprint. What we're seeing right now in certain countries, Northern Europe, Japan, and so forth, that they're opting for CRs for their offsetting purposes rather than VRs, because there's a lot of there's a lot of arguing about whether the VRs are additional or not, or should they be used for offsetting purposes, voluntary offsetting, that is. Now, aside from that, CRs are considered a byproduct of a CDM project. You generate CDM project and you create CRs. Excuse me if you hear me. I'm sorry if you hear me reverberate, but there's a speaker near me. I'm not sure if that's a problem. But anyway, CRs are considered a byproduct of CDM project. You generate CDM project and you obtain the CR. Now, the final objective of the CDM project is to reduce emissions, right? And for that reduction, there's an emissions ratio established, and according to that, you get the CRs, right? Now, the whole thing about this is the main objective of the CM project is not getting the CRs, it's getting the actual reductions in place. And now, the CDM is probably the only way to involve private capital in the reduction of emissions, a successful reduction of emissions in host countries. This is the main driver. Now, the countries. This is also establishes a collaboration between a country, let's say in Europe, and a country host country. It could be Chile, Brazil, it could be India or China, for example. Now, the big issue here is whether these, how much is enough and how much is too much or not, because we've seen a certain amount of issues going on in the market right now. Let me briefly explain. So if you see right here, this is the CR versus the EUA curve, and this is a little bit going as to what we said. If the blue line is the EUA spot curve, we see that it trades slightly higher than the CR curve. Now, if you sell right here, let's say you're allocated firm in Europe, and you sell right here, let's say you say 100,000, your national allocation plan says out of those 100,000 credits you get per year, 10% you can swap for CRs, right? Now, if it trades at 25, right, you can sell this, and you can sell this for, let's say, 10,000 CR and 10,000 EUAs. You sell them in the market at 25, whatever that is, and then you purchase the equivalent at 20. So you make a $5 profit on this, or spread, as you can say. With time, what we've seen is that this spread or price difference between the EUA and the CR has diminished to the point where it's actually, in some cases, even non-existent. But this is a strong correlation, as you can see. Now, what determines the prices of CRs aside from this correlation? Well, we always have to look at the EUA. Now, what do analysts, analysts talk a lot, and they say, what's been going on in the market and so forth. What do analysts claim that the CRs are correlated to? Mainly the EUA, as I said before. The EUA is the key or the main price driver for this. Okay, if it weren't for this, we would not be talking about about a CR at all, because it wouldn't have any sense. So you can swap it, and that's the main price driver. For if the United States and Waxman Markey goes along and they can use, which still has to go through the Senate, but if they can use CRs for compliance purposes, it is very possible that not only the carbon market might double in size in financial terms, but it can also happen that the new credit, the new CR, can increase the price over the EUA. So the swap would be worthless in Europe, but it would still be worthless in the United States. This is still a hypothesis. This is just theory. It might not translate in practice. Okay, what do the analysts also say? What does also correlate to the EUA or the market prices? Well, one of them is, for example, the coal gas fuel switch, right? Depending on the price, excuse me 1 second, please. Depending on the price. Depending on the price of the EUA, power generators in theory can use coal or gas for power generation. So let's say if the price of the EUA is very high, you don't want to use coal because you use up more EUAs. Now, if the price of the EUA is low, you would use gas for your power generation. Now, what happens in truth is this switch is hardly employed, right? Why? Because translating the actual power generation plant, some of you might know this, switching fuel is not as easy as it is in theory, and that's generally the case. Now, also analysts claim that CRs are correlated indirectly through the EUA to oil prices. What happens with oil prices? Well, gas supply contracts, depending on the formula they're written under, they're indexed to oil prices. Now, building on a coal gas switch, oil should have an impact on the EUA indirectly, right? Because let's say if oil goes up and it's under the gas supply contract, it's indexed to the gas prices, excuse me, it's the other way around. Gas supply are indexed to the oil contracts. What happens? Oil goes up, gas goes up, and now it does have an effect on the EUA, right? What happens if the coal gas switch is flawed? The oil prices should not be as effective over manipulating the EUA prices at all. Now, what really matters here is power prices, right? Utilities make up most of the European trading scheme. So if they sell less power, they need less demand for EUAs and start selling off in the market, providing provoking an increased offer. Right, demand might remain static, but what we might see is that the offer side might be above demand. It might put a downward pressure. That's actually what's been recently, happening in the carbon market, actually in the UA market recently, with prices near minimum prices or minimum averages, approximately 13, 12 euros, depending on the day. Now, when analysts they provide a study on forecasting on the prices, what happens is that they say, well, the price might be this. So we assess that the price in euros is going to be approximately 15 euros or 18 euros or 20 euros or 25 euros for this certain date. Well, how do they assess that? Well, generally they look at the offer and demand, right? And that sounds pretty logical. You look at offer and demand, you establish a fair price or an equilibrium, and you say, well, this is what it's going to be, right? And that's what happened a few years ago when we had 4 or 5 major investment banks claiming that the price was going to be near 30, 35, depending on the bank, or even 40 euros by the year 2012. Now, in fact, is that going to happen? Well, offer and demand, yes. But if historically power production or power generation remains the same, it could happen. What happens if we're in recession like right now, not only power generation decreases, but also on other industries or sectors that are also affected by national allocations plans, which can be brick manufacturing, steel industries, and all others could be, I don't know, cogeneration, whatever it is, and they produce less power, and therefore they need to sell EUAs, in some cases to finance their own operation. So, I mean, this is, at brief, this is pretty much what establishes CR prices. I don't want to hold you up, guys, too long. I mean, it's easier if if I could also talk about the primary market. I can also talk about VRs, whatever it is, because we broker this. But I think this is right now not exactly the best, the best forum right now. Not only for time, because we're basically specifying, we're focusing on the CR carbon market. So if guess if you guys have any questions, I mean, I think we can go ahead. Otherwise, okay, let me just narrow it down and finish off with what defines the CR market. First, okay, it's lack of liquidity. Okay, the CR market is approximately last year was totaling about 5 billion euro. What this means, the CR market by any terms is small. Daily liquidity, as shown in BlueNex, which is one of the main exchanges, is currently around 50k or 100,000 CRs daily. Our price is about 1150. You can make it out. It's over €1 million a day. That's very, very, very small for any type of market. That might be one transaction. Any other market could be fixed income. It could be derivatives, whatever it is. Now, because this market is very liquidity, it's very illiquid. It's very hard to find a very strong correlation. Anything that is, if one guy comes along, he might have and does a sell operation in the market. They might have 50% of the traded volume for that day, and they establish that volume. Why? Maybe because he needs it. Maybe because he needs the cash, or maybe because he wants to. Maybe because he's just speculating. Whatever it is. Now, another characteristic of the market is the large amount of legal and administrative hurdles affecting the timely issuance of CRs and therefore affecting the market offer side. What does this mean is that, as you saw in one of the prior slides shown by Rodrigo, the CDM cycle starts, with the project being identified and then up to successful registration, issuance of the CRs. What this means is that from the point A, which would be identifying the project, to point B, selling the market, there's a whole amount of legal administrative hurdles that can affect the amount of CRs you're going to get, and if you're going to get them or not, because the project can be registered. Now, as we saw before, the guys that Point Carbon, be it whoever or bank, when they assess the in many cases the CR future prices, they don't consider that many of these projects might be registered or might underperform. That is, issue less CRs or obtain less CRs than expected. Now, there's another problem affecting the CR market, which makes it a pretty tough market, and that's legal uncertainty. We don't have a legal framework post-Kyoto for after 2012. We're hoping that for Copenhagen we will have a strong plan that is in our favor as far as the market is concerned. But as of today, we don't have it. Now, what changes do we anticipate for the CDM cycle? And this is where after 2012, we don't know. I mean, and I think Rodrigo is better equipped than me to say what exact changes within the CDM cycle we expect. We hope they simplify it and make this point about the legal and administrative hurdles right here a little bit easier. In many cases, it's not in our best interest, but we just hope it is. Finally, CRs do require a multifaceted approach. That is, in order to deal with CRs, you need to know a little bit about the engineering, a little bit about the legal, and a little bit about the administrative expertise. Right? This is all these procedures described above, and you also need a little bit about the engineering, because some projects underperform. We saw landfill before, which has performed pretty well, but let me put an example. If a landfill, let's say, is in a very poor zone, there's less organic amount of trash or garbage in that, and organic trash means methane. So you can capture that, and that means the emissions ratio is increased and you get more CRs. If it's a poor zone, people don't throw away food that much, and not like, let's say, near a hotel. It can be in Cancun or wherever, and the total reduction is lower than it would be in a rich area. So that's, for example, one of the engineering problems we see, and it varies from every methodology, and some of you might know and some of you might not know, but it gets pretty specific for each case. This is a market where you can go in and you can find an infinite amount of little issues that can affect the problem, the final deal or the final successful registration of the project. So, I guess there's a Q&A. I'd wish it'd be face-to-face, but this is still outstanding. So if any of you guys have any questions regarding the market, I know it was pretty generic, but if any of you, just go ahead and ask them.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Luis. Thank you very much, Rodrigo, for the very interesting presentation. I think we ran out of time somewhere.